Meeker is a small town of around 1,000 residents nestled about 45 miles east of Oklahoma City in the heart of rural Oklahoma. It was founded in the early 1900s and named after the Meeker family. This quiet community came to life when the railroad depot was built on Julian Meeker's property, with the generous landowner donating the very ground that would become the town site. It's the kind of place that embodies classic small-town Oklahoma charm. So small, in fact, that it doesn't even have a stoplight. Most residents here own their own homes, with many retirees drawn to its peaceful streets and friendly neighbourhoods. This was a town where everyone knew everyone, and families moved to Meeker for exactly what it promised: the security and innocence of small-town America, far removed from the dangers and complexities of city life. But on the 11th of October 2005, that sense of safety would forever be shattered. Paramedics were dispatched to a modest home along a quiet street. What happened in that house and the devastating chain of missed opportunities that led to it would expose a very broken system. Kelsey Smith-Briggs was born on the 28th of December 2002 in Oklahoma City. She was the daughter of Ray Dawn Smith and Lance Briggs, a couple whose love story began the way so many small-town romances do. They had met in the halls of Meeker High School. Lance was the football player, Ray the cheerleader. She was once even a candidate for homecoming queen, with Lance proudly on her arm. Back then, their smiles and photographs told the story of two teenagers wrapped in the promise of forever. But that promise didn't truly take shape until after graduation. The couple's early years together weren't without hardship. Before they married, Ray became pregnant, but she suffered a miscarriage. Still, they pressed forward, exchanging vows on the porch of her parents' home on the 15th of July 2000. But the fairy tale was short-lived. Lance's mother, Kathy, would later describe those years as chaotic. They battled all the time. They had a terrible marriage for 2 years. They both drank. They partied too much. They did all the wrong things. But the fighting wasn't just words. Less than a year into their marriage, Ray told police that Lance had slammed her against a wall and pressed his forearm against her throat. She said the argument sparked because she hadn't supersized his McDonald's value meal. Lance was arrested and charged with a misdemeanor, eventually pleading no contest. He was placed on probation and ordered to take anger management classes. But even that incident was tangled in conflicting stories. Kathy claimed that Ray later admitted she'd made the whole thing up, that Lance had simply taken her keys to stop her from going out, and in retaliation she called police. According to Kathy, Ray tried to have the charges dropped, but she was told she could face trouble herself for filing a false report. So the charges stood. There were other arguments, more trouble. Eventually, the couple filed for divorce, finalising it in July 2002. By then, Ray was pregnant again. When Kelsey was born that December, Ray insisted that another man was the father. But Lance pushed for a DNA test. 3 months later, he learned the truth. Kelsey was his. From then on, Kelsey's life was split between two households, and two parents who could hardly stand to be in the same room together. The bitterness ran deep, and as one relative put it, the hatred between them became unbelievable. It was just unreasonable at times. Ray had primary custody. She and Kelsey lived with Ray's mother and her ailing father. Ray worked with the elderly, took shifts at a manufacturing plant, and studied at Seminole State College. Lance, meanwhile, remarried, tying the knot with a woman named Ashley Little in June of 2003. Kelsey quickly bonded with her new stepmother. When Lance was called to active duty in Iraq with the US Army Reserve, Kelsey was 2 years old and already full of personality. She loved afternoons at the park, especially the swings. She'd twirl her hair the same way she'd twirl the yarn locks of her Cabbage Patch doll as she drifted off to sleep at night. Disney's Brother Bear was on constant rotation. At a baby pageant, she took home title of Miss Personality. Kelsey was also a regular at Miss Julie's Giggles and Grins daycare, where owner Julie Sebastian remembered her as fearless and fun. She said, "She was a happy child. She would play, she would hang in there with the other kids, she would do everything they did. Outgoing, smart, she did what she wanted." On the surface, Kelsey's world was filled with all the ordinary joys of a toddler's life. Swings, storybooks, and stuffed toys. But beneath that, the tension between the adults in her life simmered, and soon they would erupt in ways that no one could take back. In 2004, when Ray's father passed away, she and Kelsey left her mother's house and moved into an apartment in Meeker. Life was in transition, and before long another major change was coming. On the night of October 15th, Ray found herself at Hot Rod's, a bar in nearby Shawnee. The lights were low, the music loud, and somewhere between the crowd and the dance floor, she met a man named Michael Lee Porter. Before the night was over, the two were dancing together, and soon they were more than dance partners. Friends say that Porter fell hard. Wendell Kelly Jr. remembered it vividly. When he got with that girl, he was in a daze. He was so in love with her, if she said jump, roll over backwards, he'd do it. Porter had 2 children of his own, 8-year-old Whitney and little Michael, who was just 2 years old. He was financially secure, at least on the surface, having taken over his family's magnet manufacturing business after both of his parents died. As president of Midwest Industries Incorporated, he oversaw a dozen employees, producing magnets used in anything from cell phones to computer keyboards. His sister actually owned the company, and to outsiders, he looked like a man with his life in order. So when Kelsey's grandmother, Kathy, heard about him, she was hopeful. She recalled, "We had heard that he was a really nice guy, and we were excited for her, that she was with somebody that had 2 children of his own. And we thought, great, they'll be a great family." But not everybody shared her optimism. Some of Porter's own friends felt uneasy. Wendell recalled, "That girl had a temper. She'd throw tantrums." His bookkeeper, Juanita Ward, went as far to warn him directly. "There's too much drama in her life right now. You need to stay out of it." But still, the relationship moved quickly. Ray was in the middle of a messy divorce, but within months she and Kelsey had packed their things and had moved to Porter's home in Shawnee. By April the next year, they were married. There's a photo from that day taken on the courthouse steps. Porter's in a pullover shirt, jean shorts and tennis shoes. Ray stands beside him, with Kelsey in her arms. They look, for the moment, like a new family, ready for a fresh chapter. But behind the smiles, Porter's financial world was crumbling. He'd quietly lost his Shawnee home and lied to cover it up, telling some people he had sold it, others that he'd leased or rented it. In truth, he had nowhere to live. That problem was solved when he brought Ray's mother's house just outside Meeker. Gayla Smith sold it to them for a reduced price of $240,000. A chance, it seemed, for stability. But what should have been a fresh start for Kelsey and her blended family was anything but. Beneath the surface, tension and trouble were already building, the kind of pressure that would eventually shatter everything. It wasn't long after Ray moved in with Michael Porter that the first signs of trouble began to appear. In January of 2005, Kelsey came to the attention of authorities. She had a broken collarbone. Ray took her to the emergency room for treatment, saying she had fallen out of bed on January 8th while sleeping at home. But just days later, while Kelsey was staying with Lance and his wife Ashley, they noticed something that went far beyond a simple fall. Kelsey had bruises across her face and body, abrasions on her neck and bottom, and that same broken collarbone. The bruises were in various stages of healing, some fading, others fresh. To Lance and Ashley, it was unmistakable. Somebody had hurt her. The physician at Unity North Hospital in Shawnee shared their concerns. The facial bruises that appeared on January 13th hadn't been there when she was treated for the collarbone injury 4 days earlier. The pattern of bruising suggested not an accident, but a beating, possibly with an object such as a hairbrush. When Lance was asked if Ray could have caused the injuries, he admitted that if she had been drinking and got mad, she could go overboard. Ray insisted that the bruises on Kelsey's face were from the fall out of bed. She also claimed that when Kelsey went to visit Lance and Ashley, she didn't have any of the other bruises. Despite the injuries and the doctor's concern, Kelsey went home with her mother. On January 21st, Ray took her to see another physician, Dr. Deborah Katcher, who noted, "Child is extremely fair and bruises may show through more than the average child and be visible for a longer period of time." But by now, the Department of Human Services, also known as DHS, was involved. On January 24th, during an emergency hearing, Kelsey was sent to live with her paternal grandmother, Kathy. A child welfare investigation concluded that Kelsey had been abused while in her mother's care. In interviews, Ray admitted she had spanked Kelsey on the diaper with her hand, but denied seeing any bruises. DHS recommended that Kelsey not be returned to her mother's custody because her safety couldn't be assured. While Lance was serving overseas in the military, he agreed to his parents being Kelsey's guardians. By February, Ray was granted modified visitation, including unsupervised visits, as long as Michael Porter wasn't present. But according to Kathy, she actually had her more than we did. Ashley recalled that almost every visit ended the same way. It was almost constantly. Every time she brought her back, there was something wrong or something had happened. On March 24th, 2005, a third referral was made when Kelsey was seen at a medical facility for a bruise on her nose and right knee, along with a closed head injury. The report said she'd been at her mother's home when she fell over. The child welfare worker noted it was unknown whether the injuries were intentional, but recommended that all visits be supervised to prevent further harm. Then came April 14th. During what should have been an enjoyable family outing to the zoo, Kelsey reportedly twisted her foot. By the time she was examined, she had a sprained ankle, bruising on both arms, and bruises on her lower back. Some were yellow with age. One bruise on her left arm was the size of a $50, just below the elbow. Kelsey said she had bitten herself, though it was unclear if there were actual teeth marks. Another bruise on her right arm was black, pencil thin, and less than an inch long. On her lower back and spine were multiple small bruises, no larger than a dime. The most alarming discovery came on April 25th. Ray brought Kelsey to the DHS office, where workers immediately saw that she whimpered constantly and she refused to walk or crawl. They ordered Ray to take her to the emergency room immediately. X-rays revealed the horrifying truth: bilateral fractures on both her left and right leg. An orthopedic surgeon at OU Medical Center examined Kelsey on the 2nd of May. His conclusion was clear: the injuries were the result of abuse. Significant force would have been required, the kind caused by violently yanking or twisting a child's legs. His report stated that the injuries didn't match the explanations given by the family. DHS informed the district attorney that allegations of abuse were in the process of being confirmed. There were also concerns that Porter had been at Ray's home when Kelsey was there, in direct violation of the court order. But on April 29th, yet another referral came in. This time, Kelsey had new facial injuries. There was bruising across the bridge of her nose that extended to her eyebrows, a knot by her right eye, and finger-shaped marks on her cheeks. The caller believed that somebody had grabbed her face. Ray claimed that Kelsey had been sleeping in bed with her stepsister when her stepsister accidentally elbowed her. A DHS worker called this explanation plausible. By May 3rd, Kelsey was once again placed in DHS emergency protective custody and moved to live with her maternal grandmother, Kayla Smith. Court battles over custody intensified. On the 5th of May, Ray sought to terminate the guardianship, insisting she had completed all court-ordered requirements. Despite the mounting evidence of abuse, some people still believe that Kelsey should be returned to her mother's care. At a June hearing, the judge heard from a dozen witnesses, including DHS workers, a court-appointed special advocate, and both grandmothers. The DHS worker recommended that Kelsey remain with Gayla, and that any return to Ray should be phased in. Kathy agreed. She wanted Kelsey back with her mother eventually, but only once the truth of the injuries was uncovered. But the special advocate recommended immediate reunification. In the end, the judge sided with that advice. Kelsey was returned to her mother's home under the community home-based service supervision. Kathy was stunned. She was convinced that either Ray or Porter was responsible for the abuse. She contacted everybody she could think of, even writing a letter to the First Lady pleading for help. But the court's position was clear. The focus was on reunifying the family, not keeping them apart. The incidents didn't stop. And now the change wasn't just on Kelsey's body. It was in her eyes, her voice, her very spirit. The vibrant little girl who once loved swings and storybooks was beginning to fade. By August 2005, the changes in Kelsey were becoming impossible to ignore. On August 2nd, CHBS workers noted disturbing new behaviours. Kelsey had begun harming herself and suffering from night terrors. 2 weeks later, on the 19th of August, she was in a car accident. 4 days after that, she was refusing to eat. When Kathy saw her granddaughter for the first time in weeks, she was unprepared for what she saw. She recalled, "We were expecting to walk in there and see this happy, healthy little child. And oh my gosh, that's not what we saw." She was horrified. Kelsey looked frail, withdrawn, and nothing like the lively little girl she remembered. Kathy immediately filed a complaint with DHS. On the 29th of August, a DHS worker visited the home, observed bruises on Kelsey's face and across her nose. They were explained away as the result of the recent car accident. But there was more. Kelsey had lost significant weight, and her once bright personality had dimmed. She was timid, cautious, almost afraid to move. September brought more troubling signs. On the 6th of September, Kelsey had a blister on her eyelid. Ray explained that she had been washing Kelsey's hair with adult shampoo when soap got in her eye and Kelsey had rubbed it until a blister formed. Not long after, Kelsey was spotted outside the home, alone and unsupervised. Even Kelsey's physician, who had followed her case for months, began raising alarms. In a letter to the Lincoln County Court, dated August 30th, she recommended that Kelsey remain in one stable home so she could be properly evaluated for possible seizure activity. That medical warning was serious enough that the court placed new limits on certain visitation arrangements. But no matter the restrictions, the decline in Kelsey's spirit was undeniable. Over the course of the year, the spark that had once defined her was disappearing. At daycare, she was no longer the bubbly, curious child who loved to play. She'd become withdrawn, aggressive, sometimes biting and punching others without warning. She didn't know what was going on, recalled Julie, a daycare worker who watched the transformation firsthand. Kelsey's hair even began falling out. She stopped eating and she refused to nap. She just changed completely, Julie said. The joy in Kelsey was being replaced by confusion, fear, and a quiet kind of resignation, as though the world had become a place where bad things simply happened and there was no way to stop them. It was the 11th of October 2005. 2-year-old Kelsey Smith-Briggs was at home with her mother, Ray. That evening, Kelsey was supposed to go to the movies with her grandmother, Gayla, something she'd been looking forward to. Before the outing, there was one more routine step in the long chain of court oversight that had become part of Kelsey's life. DHS worker Patty Bonner arrived for a scheduled home visit. The 18th such visit since summer, each one ordered by the court to check on Kelsey's welfare. Patty later described Kelsey that afternoon as just like a normal 2-year-old girl. She was playful, climbing over her mother and smiling. But Paddy also noticed that when Ray left the room, Kelsey became anxious, her energy shifting from carefree to uneasy in just a matter of seconds. Michael Porter, Ray's new husband, wasn't there. He was at work, and by all accounts in high spirits. The company he ran had just secured a $20,000 deal. When he left the shop, he was on cloud nine, his co-worker Wendell would later say. Paddy did notice a nickel-sized bruise on Kelsey and a band-aid on her finger. Still, there was nothing that seemed, on the surface, to demand immediate alarm. She left at around 1:30 p.m. Not long afterwards, Porter returned home. When he arrived, Ray and Kelsey were napping together. A short while later, Ray woke, left Kelsey in Porter's care, and went to pick up his daughter, Whitney, from school. What happened next took less than 90 minutes, but it would change everything. Sometime after Ray left, Porter dialed 911. His voice was urgent. He told dispatchers that Kelsey had been napping when he heard a strange grunting sound. When he checked on her, she looked as though she was having a seizure. Her body was rigid, her neck arched, her hands and jaw were clenched. She had a history of seizures, he said. He claimed he tapped her on the face, shouted her name, splashed cold water on her, blew in her mouth, even tried chest compressions before calling for help. Then he ran outside, cradling Kelsey in his arms, waiting for the ambulance. Paramedics arrived and worked frantically as they sped towards Prague Hospital. By the time they arrived, Kelsey was gone. The truth of her final moments would come later, in the cold, clinical light of the medical examiner's office. Kelsey's body told a horrific story. There were bruises across her ribs, chest, side and back. There was bleeding in her intestines, bruising on her scalp and face, a tear in her upper gum, blood in her ear, and one toenail was missing. Her cause of death was blunt force trauma to the abdomen. The pathologist explained that the injury could have been caused by a knee, a punch, or by being squeezed with tremendous force. There were also injuries to the genital area, though it couldn't be determined if they were the result of sexual abuse. This was clearly no accident. 2-year-old Kelsey Smith-Briggs had been killed. After Kelsey's death, Michael Porter and Ray Smith were separated and placed into interrogation rooms. Almost immediately, they turned on each other, each pointing the finger for the injuries that killed Kelsey. Ray told detectives that after DHS worker Patty Bonner left that afternoon, she and Kelsey lay down for a nap. Porter came home from work at about 2:30 p.m, she said. 15 minutes later, she left to pick up Porter's daughter from school, a task she claimed that Porter had asked her to do. According to Ray, Kelsey was fine when she walked out the door. She also painted a picture of a strained relationship between Porter and her 2-year-old daughter. Porter, she alleged, was jealous of Kelsey, accusing Ray of neglecting his children, 8-year-old Whitney and 2-year-old Michael. Ray's mother, Gayla, confirmed that she had heard that tension before. Just a week earlier, she recalled Porter had yelled at Ray, "You don't care about anything but that thing in the back." That thing was Kelsey. When detectives questioned Porter, his version of events initially matched Ray's, at least on the surface. He said he found Ray and Kelsey asleep when he came home. He also confirmed that Ray left at 2:45 to pick up his daughter. But in his telling, that was unusual. He claimed he was the one who normally collected Whitney from school, and that Ray's sudden departure didn't sit right with him. He even said he told her to wait, that he would do the pickup himself, but said that she rushed out the door anyway. This directly contradicted Ray's claims that Porter had asked her to go. Porter told investigators that around 15 to 20 minutes after Ray left, Kelsey began grunting and appeared to have a seizure. When asked if he would take a polygraph examination, which, while not admissible in court, can sometimes be used in investigations, Porter refused. He told detectives he had a bad situation with the polygraph once before. Michael Lee Porter was the only one of them arrested. He was charged with first-degree murder and ordered to be held on $1 million bail. The news stunned people who knew him. His bookkeeper, Juanita, described him as a loving father and stepfather. She said, "She'd go in there and sit on his lap and play on his computer. He'd come out in the office and get her cookies or candy bars." The mother of his son, Alicia Bruce, echoed that sentiment when she said, "I've never seen him hurt a child. That's just not Mike's personality. He loves his kids and not just his own. I wouldn't have any problem leaving Mike alone with our son today." In the eyes of the investigators, though, it was simple. Only one adult had been in the home when Kelsey suffered her fatal injuries. That made Porter the only one arrested. At least for now. Ray continued to insist she had no role in her daughter's death. In a prepared statement, she declared, "I believe my daughter was murdered. This has devastated me and my family. I had nothing to do with hurting my daughter, and anyone who implies that I had anything to do with this is wrong." Porter, for his part, also proclaimed his innocence. From jail, he wrote to his secretary at Midwest Industries, "Reach out to everyone you can and let them know that I'll be back. Have faith that the truth will be revealed." When Kelsey's history with Child Protective Services became public, outrage followed. Many asked if she had been failed, if more could have been done to keep her safe. DHS spokesman George Johnson resisted that conclusion and stated, "I'm not willing to say that the system failed this child. Whoever did this to this child not only failed this child, they failed the Oklahoma standard and the American way of life. You don't do these things to children." He pointed to the challenge of cases such as Kelsey's, stating, "You don't have someone old enough to be a credible witness about what's happening to them." Associated District Judge Craig Key defended his own decision to return Kelsey to her mother. He said, "When there's no evidence to show the child is in imminent danger and a parent completes all their obligations under DHS's treatment plan, I'm required by law to return that child to the parents. That's exactly what I did. Followed the letter of the law." Kelsey's family, her father and her grandparents, had fought to protect her. Now they were channeling their grief into advocacy. Her grandfather, Royce Briggs, said, "It's a grassroots effort made up of people who are frustrated with the system. There aren't cracks in the system, there are craters." On the 9th of November, around 200 people gathered outside the state capitol. Many carried signs with Kelsey's photo, others read, "Let the children's voices be heard," and "Justice for Kelsey." Her grandmother, Kathy, told the crowd, "We always said Kelsey's life had purpose, and we feel her purpose is to save other kids." Her father, Lance, added, "I can't believe it happened. Our goal now is to keep it from happening to anyone else." He subsequently filed a $50 million lawsuit against the state, demanding a full overhaul of DHS. Ray wasn't at the rally. Days later, the reason emerged. She was 4 months pregnant with Porter's child. From behind bars, Porter filed for divorce. Ray responded by requesting half their marital assets, attorney fees and financial support for the baby. In a statement she said, "I'm not associating this child with the father. This is my own child. The circumstances surrounding this event are not the fault of the baby." She had since learned the truth, that Porter was struggling financially and on the brink of bankruptcy. She thought that he was wealthy, that she could live a life of luxury at home. Then in December came another surprise. Porter's bail was slashed to $250,000. His sister put up the family's business as collateral. He walked out of jail. Shortly after Michael Porter's release, State Representative Chris Steele announced plans to push legislation to reform Oklahoma's child protection system. It was first called the Child Protection Reform Act, but Steele said he would rename it the Kelsey-Briggs Law. The bill aimed to create stronger review procedures and allow greater input from those advocating for a child's welfare. It would also give judges and DHS the authority to request investigative help from the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. While the bill moved forward, the case took another turn. Towards the end of February, Ray was arrested and charged with child neglect and enabling child abuse. Prosecutors alleged that she knew, or should have known, that Kelsey was being abused and allowed it to happen. Although investigators still believed it was Porter who beat Kelsey to death, they said that Ray's inaction made her culpable, She was released on $25,000 bail. 2 months later, she gave birth to a baby boy, but because of the felony charges against her, he was automatically placed into state protective custody. Not long after, lawmakers approved the Kelsey Briggs Act. Kathy said the bill might have saved her granddaughter's life. She stated, "This tragedy is something a child should never have to go through. We can't bring Kelsey back, but we can do something." Lance filed 2 lawsuits, one against the state and another against physicians Dr. Kelly Coons and Dr. Andrea Barrett. He accused them of failing to recognise and report abuse when treating Kelsey's broken legs and collarbone. Then in July there was another bombshell. Michael Porter was now charged with sexually abusing Kelsey. Her body had been exhumed for a second autopsy, and Dr. Dean Hawley, a nationally recognised expert from Indiana University, confirmed sexual abuse, noting a genital tear and bruising. The following month, Governor Brad Henry signed the Kelsey Smith-Briggs bill into law. Both Ray and Porter pleaded not guilty to all of the charges against them, and the judge ordered separate trials, with Porter's case to be heard first. On the 3rd of February 2017, just before his trial began, Michael Porter appeared in court and announced that he was accepting a plea deal. He sobbed as he pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of enabling child abuse. In exchange, prosecutors dropped the first-degree murder and sexual abuse charges. Porter was sentenced to 30 years in prison, with a requirement to serve at least 25 and a half years before being eligible for parole. His attorney, Paul Sutton, said Porter was the only one willing to accept responsibility for his role in Kelsey's death, but maintained his client didn't kill her, instead pointing the finger at her mother, Ray. For the first time, Porter claimed that in July of 2005, he heard Ray yelling and Kelsey crying, and then saw her strike the child in the stomach. He admitted that he never reported it. His defense attorney, Sutton, said, "Michael has agreed to assist the district attorney's office in any way he can. We all hope that the continued search for the truth results in true justice." Kelsey's grandmother, Gayla, remained convinced that Porter was the killer. She said, "You can make anything look good on paper." Kathy was less certain, saying she believed that Porter might actually be remorseful. Behind the scenes, it was revealed that prosecutors had built a strong case against him. Porter's own daughter told her school counsellor, Catherine Reynolds, that he spanked Kelsey real hard one time and hit her head against a brick wall. She was only 8 years old at the time, and she told Reynolds that Porter acted nice to Kelsey when people were around, but was mean when nobody was looking. Another witness, Janice Cotton, said she once asked Kelsey about an injury to her leg, and Kelsey told her, "Daddy Mike kicked me out of bed." DHS worker Annette Swinford was prepared to testify that she twice overheard Kelsey say Daddy Mike had hurt her. In total, 5 witnesses were ready to tell the jury they had heard Kelsey blame her injuries on Porter. With that kind of testimony waiting, Porter's defense team likely knew that an acquittal was impossible. The plea deal was their only option. In March, Ray was additionally charged with child abuse, or, in the alternative, permitting child abuse. It was an unusual charge, meaning that prosecutors wanted jurors to convict her either for directly harming Kelsey herself or for allowing Michael Porter to harm her. Her defense team quickly filed a motion requesting that the trial be moved to neighbouring Creek County, a request that the judge approved. While preparations for trial were underway, a report into Kelsey's murder was released, revealing major failings by DHS. The report faulted DHS workers for failing to investigate why Kelsey was repeatedly injured. It found that they may not have considered the danger Kelsey was in as serious enough to warrant a thorough investigation, despite her having 2 broken legs and a broken collarbone at different points before her death. The report stated that after such injuries, DHS could have contacted police immediately. The Oklahoma Commission on Children and Youth concluded that Kelsey's death exposed major systemic problems in how the state handled child abuse cases. Among the changes it called for were better training for police officers, prosecutors, and child welfare workers. Then in July, jury selection began in Creek County. By the 9th, a panel of 7 women and 5 men had been chosen. The next morning, Ray was escorted into the courtroom and seated alongside her defence attorneys. During opening statements, prosecutor Richard Smotherman told jurors that Kelsey had been beaten to death. He explained that her injuries were so severe, her pancreas had burst. Calling her death the final chapter in a horrible tragedy, he detailed the pattern of injuries that Kelsey had endured in the year leading up to her murder. He stated, "We know the abuse didn't stop because she's not here. That day should never have happened. Smith was either causing the abuse herself, or she knew about it and she did nothing to stop it." Ray's attorney, Steve Huddleston, countered by declaring her innocence. He told the jury that Michael Porter had been the one abusing and ultimately killing Kelsey. He stated, "She loved her daughter. Her daughter was her life." Testimony began with graphic photographs from the medical examiner's office, showing Kelsey dressed in a t-shirt and a blood-stained diaper. Jurors were then walked through her previous injuries, the broken legs, the broken collarbone, and the numerous bruises. DHS workers testified about their investigations and the explanations Ray had given for the injuries. One worker said she believed police had been notified after Kelsey's broken legs, although evidence suggested they hadn't. Her grandmother, Kathy, testified about Kelsey's appearance on the 27th of August. She told the jury, "She was different. She looked like she had lost her spirit." Ashley, who was formerly married to Kelsey's father, Lance, also testified, "I felt something wasn't right, that she was being abused." The prosecution's most unexpected witness was Michael Porter himself. Prosecutor Smotherman openly told jurors he believed that Porter had sexually assaulted and killed Kelsey, but nevertheless he called him to the stand anyway. Wearing an orange jumpsuit and shackled at the wrists, Porter admitted he had made a mistake by not reporting Ray for abuse when he saw it. He testified, "I said a lot of things to cover up for her. I would have rather believed anything than my wife killed her." According to Porter, he had witnessed 3 incidents of abuse, including Ray punching Kelsey in the stomach with a closed fist, jerking her from the car, and throwing her into a chair just 2 days before she died. During cross-examination, Huddleston accused Porter of being the real killer and of sexually assaulting Kelsey. He pointed out that Porter had called Kelsey's grandmother before calling 911 the day she died, and revealed that Porter had put a diaper on Kelsey after finding her gravely injured. Huddleston said, "You knew what you did, and you didn't want anyone to find out that she was naked from the bottom down." Huddleston also challenged Porter's credibility by asking why, if he had truly witnessed abuse, he had written a letter and testified on Ray's behalf during a custody hearing. "You never saw Ray Dawn hurt Kelsey, and that's the truth," he argued. He added that no loving parent would leave their own children alone with somebody they believed to be abusive. Yet Porter had done exactly that. Other witnesses also described seeing Ray mistreat Kelsey. Gene Snyder testified that in 2004 he saw Ray swat Kelsey 3 times inside the entrance of a convenience store, holding her by the arm as the child tried to sit down to avoid being spanked. He said Ray then picked Kelsey up and slung her over the front seat of the car into the back. Ray's former boss, Deborah Gilbreth, recalled Ray being upset because police were investigating her for abuse. Ray admitted to Deborah that she had spanked Kelsey with a hairbrush over her diaper, a story which was corroborated by former co-worker Mildred Johnson. Deborah also testified about another incident in which Kelsey told her that Daddy Mike was mean. Deborah urged Ray to look into those comments because she was supposed to be her daughter's protector. Instead, Ray brushed it off. She called Kelsey Little Miss Attitude and said she was just jealous. DHS worker Annette Swimford described a supervised visit which she heard Kelsey say, "Daddy Mike hurt my head." Ray laughed and told her daughter that was impossible because Porter hadn't been around her. The prosecution then closed its case with expert witness Dr. Robert Block and Dr. Andy Sullivan, who testified that Kelsey's injuries were consistent with battered child syndrome. They further revealed that her legs had been broken at different times. Clear evidence, they said, of repeated abuse. Ray's mother, Kelsey Smith, was the first to take the stand for the defence. She told the jury that Ray had wanted an autopsy performed to find out how Kelsey died, while Porter had opposed it. According to Kelsey, their suspicions about Porter had started to grow in the weeks before Kelsey's death. One afternoon, she said that Porter had taped Kelsey's eyes shut while playing. It wasn't a joke to Kelsey. We was starting to watch him, she told the jury. The testimony then shifted to Ray's demeanour in the aftermath of her daughter's death. Pastor Charles Percy recalled finding her in the hospital, cradling Kelsey's lifeless body, asking him to pray with her, and pleading to know why her little girl had been taken. Porter was there too, and according to Percy, his reaction seemed strangely exaggerated. The pastor described him making agonising sounds, bouncing off the wall, and beating his fists against the floor. Percy admitted, "It bothered me. It really troubled me that he was responding the way he was responding." Officer Scott Morrison offered a similar account. Outside the hospital, he said that Porter was pounding on the bed of a pickup truck, muttering over and over, "She's never going to forgive me." It later emerged that in the days after Kelsey's death, Porter had threatened to take his own life. When the defence rested, the trial drew to a close. The jury deliberated for just 2 hours and 40 minutes before returning to the courtroom. The public gallery filled as the verdict was read. Ray Dawn Smith, guilty of enabling child abuse. The jury recommended a sentence of 27 years. They could have given her life. Ray bowed her head and wept. "I don't understand. Help me." Later, a juror summed it up bluntly and said, "It was pretty obvious she knew what was going on and seemingly didn't do anything about it." For Kelsey's family, it was some measure of justice. Her grandmother, Kathy, said the verdict sends a message to other abusive parents that they will be held accountable if their children are injured. Ray, however, continued to insist the entire case was a conspiracy. She claimed she never knew her daughter was being abused. She said, "I never ever thought Mike would have hurt Kelsey. If I would have thought that, I would have ran with her and left everything else behind. Then I would have turned him in. Kelsey was my best friend in the entire world, and it hurts so bad for people to say the things they do. I didn't hurt Kelsey and I didn't sit back and let it happen. If I could have seen into the future, I never would have dated Mike Porter." It was a statement heavy with irony. Ray had been warned again and again that her daughter was being abused. She had chosen to look the other way. When sentencing came in September, Ray was asked if she had anything to say. She didn't ask for mercy. She didn't claim innocence. Instead, she turned to Kathy and said, "Kathy, I forgive you." Kathy's response was swift and cutting. "She's demented." For years, Kathy had been the driving force behind bringing Ray to justice, making sure she was charged for her role in Kelsey's death. Lance, too, said that Ray's words showed no remorse, not for what she had done and not for what she had failed to do, protect her child. The wrongful death lawsuit against Kelsey's doctors was dismissed for having no legal cause of action, but the suit against the state remained. Eventually, the family reached a settlement, $525,000 from the state, plus another $100,000 from a private agency. From her prison cell, Ray demanded half. The judge denied her. In the end, all she was left with was the same thing she had on the day Kelsey died: empty hands. Well, that is it for this episode of Morbidology. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I'd like to say a massive thank you to my new supporters up on Patreon: Victoria, Deanna, Kathy, Sonia, and Leah. In addition to Patreon, Morbidology is now up on Apple subscriptions, where you can get ad-free, early release, and bonus episodes of Morbidology Plus. The support up on Patreon and Apple subscription seriously goes such a long way and helps to defray the costs of hosting subscription services and freedom of information requests, and I am eternally grateful. Remember to check us out at morbidology.com for more information about this episode and to read some true crime articles. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and have an amazing week.